Chase, Pami, welcome to the podcast.
Absolutely, brother. I'm happy to be on, and we've been talking for a few minutes, but again, I'm sure everybody's a fan, and I already told you, but dude, you're doing incredible things with this for the sport. I'm a fan of wrestling. I'm a fan of people that are for wrestling, and I absolutely love what you've been able to build with the Wrestling Changed My Life podcast.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. I'm really excited to get into it with you. And if you're watching on video, folks, you can see Chase is at his academy, the Gold Rush Wrestling Academy. How did this all start, man? I want to hear about the whole journey.
Man, this started probably about 2011, 2012 when I was still competing. I had a dream. I always so let me even back that up a little bit. I grew up here in Vegas, born and raised. Um, Growing up, you didn't have private clubs. You always had kind of a group of dads that would have a club at a high school, and you would go and during that time, that's kind of how you did it growing up. And then as I came through high school, we had a club, but it wasn't really a club. It was a couple dads that had some money and hired two great coaches, which we were talking about Henry. Gray Maynard was one of my club coaches. Gray also coached Henry and worked with Henry and Angel a lot. Gray fought in the UFC, three-time All-American. And then another guy named Eugene Harris, who was an All-American at the University of Oregon. He wrestled at my high school here in Vegas. So I had two D1 guys right out of college my last 2 years. And so we had kind of this, not like quote unquote like club, but really it was just the kids from my high school and like one or two randoms. But then, yeah, I left, I went to college and really the first time I ever heard about it was I'll never forget talking with Josh Chiarella. I started hearing like about overtime, right? And
Yes.
you know that. And so I started hearing a little bit about that when Bormet and um, Pritzloff, because they were together doing that, I believe. And they got those jobs at Michigan, I believe, at the same time. And I remember hearing, oh, the overtime guys. And I kind of looked into it. And then I asked Chiarella about it when we were on a trip overseas. And he told me, and immediately, I'll never forget it. 2011, we're in Belarus. We were roommates. And immediately it popped into my mind that the dream and the goal of starting a wrestling academy, right? A wrestling club that was going to help grow the sport of wrestling in Las Vegas and in Nevada, right? Because we really don't have much that's come out from Nevada, just in the grand scheme of things. We're a West Coast area, and so I started dreaming about it. I got ideas. I lived in Illinois, so lived in Champaign. I trained there for a while, so I always would go up to Izzy Style and spend time up there and pick his brain and figure out what he was doing. And I was always asking questions of different clubs, the Pinnacle guys, and Perler and some of these guys that have been doing it for a while, and really tried to kind of pick apart different things about what they were doing. And then also looking into like jujitsu and looking into gymnastics and all these different ways that from the business side, because right, like I think it's really hard to come back to an area where wrestling isn't, there's only a small group of really elite kids in Vegas. So to really, you had to grow the market, and that's something that we've been really blessed to do. And I think we've done some pretty unique things to be able to grow a whole brand new market of wrestling here in Las Vegas. So yeah, dude, it was a dream for 10 years. So what people see right now when they come into the gym and they're like, this is amazing. And I'm like, it is, but there was a lot of years of dreaming and thinking about it. And man, again, I remember sitting in Illinois on a cold winter, like it was, I don't know if you remember 2013, 2014, it was just the most negative degrees that they had, I guess, in Champaign and constant snow. And I'll never forget sitting there on right after Christmas. I just came back from Vegas. I'm living in my apartment by myself, like training and trying to make a world team and thinking like, dude, I just want to move back to Vegas and start this academy. But it took 6 years from that point to get there. And so, yeah, dude, 10 years of planning it out. And that's how it really, the dream came about. And then I spent 2 years while I was at Penn going through some mentorship. Roger Reyna, who's the head coach there, really mentored me on the business side,
He's
sat down
amazing.
with me. Oh, dude, smart guy, not just wrestling, but entrepreneurial wise. He sat down with me and took me through this whole organization of how to build these different levels when you're starting a business, and all these different pieces to it. And I'll be forever grateful, because those were tools that I used to really get this thing going, especially when I moved back, especially in the middle of COVID. Like, COVID hit, and then 2 months later I moved back, So
Jeez.
that's kind of the backstory, a little bit of it. Yeah, dude, a lot of dreaming went into it. 10 years of it.
I can only imagine how like how many times you thought about how you design it, what equipment you'd have, like what would the layout be. And if you go back to that hotel room in Belarus, so that's the first time you heard about overtime from Chirella, or like what was so special about that moment?
So I had this vision to see all the best kids train together in Las Vegas. And I never went to overtime, so I didn't know what it really looked like. But the concept of bringing kids together and creating this facility where the best kids can train together and allow them to grow as people, because I know what wrestling does as far as growing people, but also to grow as wrestlers and the culture, right? Like, you look at Illinois, and I'm talking to you, a guy that's like, it's been around and seen it the last, they had that run in 13, 14, 15, 16, all those years at Fargo, and you had the Isaiah Whites and the OPRF kids and the Izzy style kids and the, and the Montini kids and all these kids. And a lot of that, if I'm correct, a lot of that, kind of stemmed from what was laid down, years before, when overtime was going. Maybe a not direct correlation, but there's a lot that stemmed from that, right? And I recognized that as I saw that happening in Illinois. I kind of looked at, man, there's a lot of people that are tied back to overtime. And look, that's what I really want to do. I want to do that for generations, well beyond my time, right? 30, 40 years from now, I probably won't be coaching wrestling, but I hope the impact of what Gold Rush laid down is still seen, which I do believe there's so many people who came out of overtime that were impacted by that program that you talk to now.
Yeah.
And that's what really inspired me. And I love that idea when I talked to Josh.
It's just so cool to think that. So I graduated high school in 07. Overtime was coming around strong then. And there would be years where the entire junior dual team would only be overtime kids. And right along that same time, you had Izzy style, which was a little bit different approach than Bourmet, but still super, super high level, the same structure, organization. So you had these two mega clubs kind of going head to head for a while there. And it was exciting, man.
Yeah, that was, and I think by the time I'd gotten into the college level, or excuse me, by the time I had gotten onto the international level and found out about overtime, I think pretty much was kind of winding down, right?
Yeah.
Right around 2011, 12, 13.
I mean, think about that. You had a club coach go right to Michigan. Like, you wouldn't think that was even possible in the 2000s. Now it's not that uncommon, for someone who's an elite club. I mean, obviously Barmetta coached at Wisconsin before overtime, but basically you had a kids club coach running an elite academy that now leapfrogged to Michigan, which is just like crazy to even think about.
It's amazing, right? You see Scott Green. I know
That's who I was thinking
little
of.
different situation,
Yeah.
but that is a really unique situation. And like, there's good programs. Michigan is obviously a top tier program, top 5 program. So pretty amazing testament to what he was able to do.
And so when you talk about kind of your journey, you mentioned you went to Illinois. How did you end up at the Illinois RTC?
So really, Mark Perry was the whole reason for that. He was at Cal Poly in my senior year. He came over to Cal Poly, and it really worked well together. I had a good relationship with him. I learned a lot from him. Big part of being an All-American and making the national finals that year, I do believe was just some of the elements he brought to my game. So then I moved to the Olympic Training Center, and I was there 2010 to 2013. And I'd kind of hit my ceiling at the training center. Some of the bigger guys were coming in. That's around the time Snyder and Reeder and Kilgore came in. A lot of guys had just retired out of the 2012 crew. And in that 2012 crew, we had at one point we had 4, 5, 6, and 7 on the rankings ladder.
Wow.
So we at 145.
So who
But
was the
I
coach?
need
Zeke at the time?
that was Slay. Slay
Slay
was
was the coach.
the he was the resident coach, and Zeke was the head USA coach, and Zadok was the developmental coach. So
Wow. That's a loaded staff right there.
yeah, dude, the knowledge I took from those guys was amazing. And so yeah, I knew it was time for a change. Um, it's a little side story, but it's always one of those. I don't have many. I don't ever regret anything in life, but I always do. There's a couple times where I have those. What if I would have done that? So very few people know, but Kale had talked to me for a bit. Starting in 2011, Kale had talked to me, and we it ended up not working out just because I was at the training center. I'd only been there a year. So we kind of just, we'll revisit this in a couple years. So 2013 comes, and I'm deciding I'm going to make a change, and uh, I'm looking at Illinois. I'm looking at all these places, and then like a month before I'm about to move, we're at a training camp, and I'm wrestling with Burroughs, and I'm really at that point I'm wrestling. I'd been fourth in the Olympic trials, fourth in the world team trials, so I knew like I was pushing that, and I felt like I was about to jump through, and it was practice. It is what it is. But Jordan and I were having a back and forth match, and had some, Taylor was still just coming on the scene. So anyways, he saw all that, and then I think it was just conversations from the past, but he pulled me aside and said, "Hey, I want to talk to you tomorrow morning. I'd love to have you come out to Penn State." And that's when they were just getting going. Tion had just made the world team the year before. And I remember that very vividly. That situation was interesting, because we sat down, we talked a little bit. I was like, okay, this is a really interesting option on the gender. Sorry, my brother-in-law's.
So what was the offer?
So we talked about it. He said, "Hey, do you want to move out to Penn State?" And he called me over the next couple of days, dude. I remember being like, I can't take this guy's call. I had already committed to Illinois. I'd already committed I was going to go to Illinois, be at the RTC there. I already had an apartment, a down payment. I'd signed all the document, all the papers that you get. And so I remember being like, dude, like I remember even one time he called me, and I was like, I didn't pick it up, because I was like, dude, I don't know how to tell this guy, like,
That's Cale
it's Cale
Sanderson
Sanderson.
calling.
This is Cale Sanderson. Like, I'm like, I don't know what to do with this, And I remember, I think I took some time, called him back, and said, "Hey, like, I made this commitment. I can't back out. I just I couldn't pull it off inside of me, you know. So I did end up going to Illinois and doing, being there 2 years. But that's always one of those things that you kind of wonder, like, what would have happened? What could have happened? All in all, I ended up going to Illinois and back to the training center, and then Pennsylvania. And I think a lot of ending up at University of Pennsylvania ended up being the best ultimate decision for where I am now. But it's still one of those that I'm like, oh, what could have happened, But I just I had a hard time turning back on making a commitment,
What
So
was Kale like from your interactions you had with him?
Kale's all man. He was always he was very easy, like spoken well, very easy to talk to. It was, but very kind of matter of fact. I'll never forget. He said, "Well, kind of like, you're gonna go there, but you can come to Penn State, and we're basically like we're the best." Just very matter of fact. And they were right. They produced world team member, champion after champion. I remember him saying that, and him being kind of confused, like, really, like you're gonna do that, like, and it's but no, no hard feelings that I know of. Ever since then, I see him, shake his hand anytime I've come out there and trained. Always just really great to me. So, but very matter of fact in the sense of they are right.
Right.
They are the best right now.
Hands down. It's funny you talk about the OTC. I didn't realize you went back in 2016. And literally this morning, I just had Helen Maroulas on, and we were talking about the OTC during an Olympic year. You were there for two of them. How does it change the OTC, kind of the environment and the energy when you're in an Olympic year?
In 2011, 2012 was different than 2016 because the resident program was really rocking at that time. We had a full, we had 20, 25 guys in the room, in the resident program, and, good wrestlers that were on the national team. You had Win Mahalik and Moza Faye and Dustin Kilgore. And then you had Derek Moore and Philip Simpson and Angel Cejudo and Justin Perch. And then you had myself, and you had Angel Escobedo, who lived there for a bit, and Nickerson. And so it was a whole different thing at that point. The interesting thing was your training partners, even though a lot of us were in the same weight in 2012, we did train together for the most part all the way up until the tournament. It's not like we were all competitive. We were all doing our extra things. But we still trained all the way up till that point. But I know the girls, it's, I remember stories of just like, man, girls are mean, man. They're mean to each other. So, and then 2016, it was a different game because I came back kind of Illinois wasn't the right fit for me. I didn't really know what I wanted to do after 2016. It was kind of a weird time in my life. And I just hurt my back. I was kind of on a real down slope in my career. And I just kind of felt like, man, I need to go back. And I also looked at Arizona State at the time and possibly going there because they had Jordan Oliver and Zeke and things like that. But I ultimately just needed to kind of go back to be with somebody who I felt like was going to care for me as a wrestler, but more as a person, because I was kind of unsure what I was going to do with my future. And that's where Slay played such a big part in helping me on the map, but helping steer me in kind of the right direction, so to speak, in 2016. But the training center, I did not have partners at that time. It was really difficult. I went to Arizona almost every month in 2015, 2016. I coached
legit
at the
no partners.
Legit. I really didn't have anybody. Like I had a couple random high school kids. I had a college guy that would come over from the Air Force Academy because I coached there. So I'd have college guys come in every once in a while. I mean, there were even mornings where I drilled with like Elena Perishkova, or like I would go in and grab like Terry Steiner, whatever I get my hands on at that point. So but Slay was really willing to let me go anywhere that I needed at that point. So it was just, that was different. The resident program had really kind of started to fizzle out by that point. Mark Hall, he was there. He came back in February or March. So I did spend a lot of time with Mark, getting ready for the last chance qualifier. I didn't qualify for the trials that year, but I did learn a lot from Mark, and I did help him train for the junior world team trials that year, and pretty much was his main training partner all the way through that point.
So is that a high school Mark Hall at that point, or a college Mark Hall?
That was the year before he went into college.
Wow. Isn't it crazy to think about guys like that, guys like Yanni and Spencer, like when they're in high school, like their level is just ridiculous.
Dude, nuts. I remember wrestling Yanni in 2015 or 16, somewhere around there, 17. He was at the training center, still in high school. And like, dude, I was like, I mean, I'm 29, 30 years old at that point, something like that, I'm like, and I was struggling to get takedowns, like, I mean, every position was a fight. Like, and same thing with Mark, dude. Like Mark was actually coming to the training center when he was in 8th grade. It was 2012, right after the Olympics, all of 2012, he was living there, dude. A lot of it. And I was training with him, and he was in 8th grade. And after the Olympic trials, I came back and I was getting ready for the World Cup. And I actually trained with Mark as an 8th grader, dude. I trained with him legitimately for 2 months leading up to the World Cup.
That is so stupid that he was on that level.
Dude. And he was still, at that age, he was still a little like, he didn't know his body quite, but I'll never forget, dude. 1 year later, he came back after a year in high school, and I wrestled with him in practice. And dude, I kid you not, like it was extremely difficult for me to score. Like every takedown was a fight. His scrambling went like he jumped levels in his scrambling. Like I think one time we came in and I was like, hey, let's just go 50 takedowns, first to 50 takedowns. And I remember it
50.
took being like an old man, like an older man using my strength to like push him up against the wall to get like takedowns. Like it was not easy, dude. It was difficult. He would get takedowns. I was like, dude, what happened from a year ago? I was beating you up, and then a year later, like, I mean, we probably were in there an hour, hour just going at it. It took that long on a ninth grade kid. It was special.
Wow, that's amazing. And it's so like you've been around so many legends, and you think about your early years at Cal Poly, not to mention the great Azevedo, John Azevedo, but was Sammy Henson still there?
Sammy was there for 2 years. Yep. So John was always a consistent. Um, the assistants while I was there, Matt Azevedo was there, head coach of Drexel. He was there for 4 years. Early on, a lot of people forget this. Joe Heskett was there my first year.
Oh,
So Joe,
wow.
Nick Preston from Ohio State was there for 1 year. And then Sammy came in my sophomore, junior year, and then Perry was there my senior year. So there was quite a mixture of coaches amongst those groups. And then you had like a couple guys that went to UC Davis that were Marcos Orozco was a volunteer assistant and stuff like that from the area.
And that was during the time where Sammy was actually Matt's coach, and he pinned Henry at the U.S. Open 2008.
Yeah, dude. Yeah,
That's crazy.
Never forget that. Right. I think Henry went for a head pinch and Matt just sprawled out and touch
Yeah.
fall.
Which is wild because Henson used to be the guy that was taking out Matt Azevedo and Henry, and so for him to coach. What do you remember? What do you take away from your time working with Sammy? What stands out?
Sammy, so I'm forever grateful to Sammy. Forever grateful because Sammy, most people know this, but he's kind of a my way or the highway kind of guy. It's like you do it my way or you don't. And you respect what he's done as a competitor, the athletes that he's coached. He's really good one-on-one with athletes. I think running a room, he's good, but his one-on-one and his ability to kind of get into your head and help you jump levels. I always say the big reason of why I was able to All-American my junior year was because of his influence, and really being able to make the national finals was because of his influence. I remember at one point he was kind of getting annoyed with me because he would text me on Saturdays or Sundays after practice and tell me, hey, you need to go get an extra 4 miles in, or it's Sunday, you need to go get a lift and get a run. And I would be like, dude, but I need to recover, And I remember he started to get annoyed, like, dude, I'm telling you what you want to jump levels. This is what you got to do, right? Like, this is where you're at realistically. You're not the guy. You're not there. And he started getting annoyed and kind of pulled back from me a little bit. And I remember we had this kind of like week or two where it's kind of awkward. And then I remember he took me on a van ride, and we had this kind of come to Jesus moment. Like, all right, like I need to understand you as my coach, but I got to know him a little bit more as a coach and what was important to him. And as an athlete, I just told him basically, like, look, whatever you say from here on out, I'm going to do. If you tell me to get up at 3 a.m. and go around the mountain, I'll go around the mountain. If you tell me to do this, do that. And everything he said for me from that point on, regardless of what it was, how much I disagreed with it, I did it. And I ended up breaking through and becoming an All-American that year. And then the stuff I learned from him on top, I think that was the round before the round of 12. I was literally going to lose the match. We were in the last overtime. I had locked my hands and I was on top. So there was really nothing I could do. And I ended up tilting the guy for 3 points with like 6 seconds left, and then
in the blood round,
in the round before the blood round.
Round before the blood round.
Yeah.
Wow.
And strategy wise, he was a big help when we wrestled JP O'Connor in the round of 12 that year. I'd never beaten JP, and he put together the strategy of how we were going to do it. And really it pretty much played out exactly. And then the next year I had more tilts and back points than I ever had at any point in my career. And in the quarterfinals in my senior year, I had lost to that guy 2 times that year, and I tilted him and was able to ride him out to win that match. But that was all such a huge influence
Wow.
of Sammy Henson and his style, and his mentality too.
Like how much? Yeah, I was gonna say, how much of those one-on-ones is it? It's you're gaining technique, but how much of it also is just like his belief in himself is so strong. I feel like that passes through to his guys, and they start believing in themselves more.
Yeah, and that's what it was. That's why Chuck Liddell used him when he was coaching him, and Sammy when he did those one-on-ones. For me, for me, I know I was a little bit of a head case. I had my challenges kind of trying to manage the mental part of the game, and that's where he was so big for me in those one-on-ones. Technically, I picked up a lot of his stuff on top. Becoming as good as I did on top was from him.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you think about Mark Perry, he's another top guy, but yeah, he's also got some awesome scrambles, and that's an approach. I think you could correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like two kind of polar opposite guys if you're comparing Sammy Henson and Mark Perry.
Yes, but on top, both hammers on top. I was able to blend both of their top stuff together because Sammy rode legs. Most people think, oh, short guys can't ride legs. Like, I mean, obviously, I think that's changed a lot over the years now. I mean, you see guys like Rutherford, who's a shorter guy, but puts legs and he's going to break your back, But I kind of merged a lot of what I got from Sammy and a lot of what I got from Mark to really develop my top game my senior year, that was a huge, huge part of my wrestling that year.
Sammy on top in the freestyle with those legs, vicious, absolutely vicious. I think there was when he wrestled Abbas in 2000, right before, not right before, but Abbas was close to breaking through. I think he was even beating him on his feet. They put him down to parterre, either at the U.S. Open or it must have been the U.S. Open, and he got on top, and he's just so mean on top and so ruthless with those legs in power halves. Like, man, just vicious.
Yeah, he only 2 people that I can really think of off the top of my head. Maybe there's more, but with a high gut is Sammy Henson and Kendall Cross. 2 guys who had incredible high guts. And Sammy, yeah, had a gnarly high gut that he would use his legs. He'd put his legs in, he'd get this high gut, lock it up. I mean, he was strong. They call him the bull for a reason. Strong as can be.
Yeah, he's awesome, man. One of the greats. And so you have these assistants kind of coming in, cycling through, but at the same time you have John Azevedo, and he's someone who, I definitely know his name, know his credentials, but I don't know if I know what makes him so unique and so special. So maybe just talk a little bit about the relationship you have with Coach Azevedo.
John was first, I went to Cal Poly because really big part of him, my faith, my Christianity, and he was so well respected in that way. And so from the first conversation I had with him, he's a little awkward to talk to in terms of recruiting calls. Any recruit will tell you that. Like, it was always interesting calls. But I knew that's who I wanted to wrestle for. And at that time, Cal Poly was hot. They had multiple All-Americans in a row. But John, technically, I'm just a master. Like, incredible attention to detail and positional awareness to this day. Drills that I learned from him, technique that I use from him, like, are things I still teach to this day, things that I still preach. Like, you talk about a guy that, like, the fundamentals of positional wrestling, like how to break it down, and drills and techniques that mimic that. Absolutely incredible. I didn't wrestle exactly like him. I did some things, but I did a lot of different things. And I think the other thing that John was for people was just he's another one that was just a safe coach to talk to. Like, you needed someone to talk to. You wanted to sit down and talk life and have coffee and do that. Like, he was that kind of guy. He had that kind of personal touch to his athletes. And any athlete, I think, that would ever say they were coached by him, whether they wrestled 2 of the years of college, 5 of the years of college, or whatnot, they would always probably tell you his care for them as a person and as an athlete. If they were going through a tough time, hey, can I pray for you? Those kind of things. He would be he was just very in tune to that. And I think that's why he got the best out of his athletes.
That's a special coach, right? Who can be someone you can go to as a safe place, and at the same time has the technical knowledge to back it up. And you mentioned he had some drills. So these are drills that by the time you got there, you'd never seen these before. And you get to college and he's teaching this stuff and you're like, holy shit, there's like a whole new world to this.
Yeah, it was different. And like I said, to this day, there's drills that I still use with the little kids. And I use the same exact drills with right now, working with UFC fighters. Cody's got a fight. Like a lot of these guys that are up and coming in the UFC, I've been able to work with a lot of them. Use the exact, almost like 3 or 4 of the exact same drills he did. I just tailored them a little bit, but pretty much, yeah, I got it from him. Yeah.
And, a lot of parents listening where they didn't wrestle, but their kids wrestled and they don't live in Vegas. So I'm just wondering if anything comes to mind, like what's a principle or two that you think is often overlooked that's something you're teaching and that you learned from Coach Azevedo?
On a technical level,
on
a technical level, we do there's a positional drill that we do. It's a transition drill, transitioning from double to single to high crotch, and then I added in body lock. And I think it encompasses all the positions while teaching to keep your hips in, while teaching to knee pound and get your hips in, moving as your partner's moving. So that is a huge fundamental drill. And then his inside tie series was, everybody knows inside tie. They learn it from that's probably one of the first things kids learn is how to, grab on. But the inside tie series that he teaches and breaking it down from step 1 to step 2 to step 3 to step 4, and then putting it into action. Those are the huge technical pieces I took away from him.
So he has a whole series on just tying up.
Yeah. Getting the inside tie, where your I'm a right leg lead, so where your left hand is on the tie, and then all the different ways you can use your right hand, wrist, V block, shoulder, head, fakes, and then he breaks it down to another level where that's where that transition drill would come into place, because you'd learn how to get into the legs and then what to do when you're at the legs, and then he had a whole series from each of those, from a double, from a single, from a high crotch, how to finish any position he had, right? There was like 4 or 5 positions out of each position that you would run into that you would know how to finish.
Wow. That's something like that is just so fascinating to me, the technical nuances of it. And what I love about your style is, I was just watching some of your matches. A lot of your attacks, your right hand's doing the action, a high crotch, a pull single. But then on that elbow block, you're kind of using the left hand as a brace and driving them over with the right on the elbow tie.
Yeah, that was developed. So I got that from Gray Maynard in club. He taught me that. And then over the years in college, I developed it. The 2 main people that I really watched, well, the one main person, I didn't know Mike Zadok had been doing it. So I didn't start picking apart Mike Zadok stuff until I was on the international level. But a guy named Elbrus Tadeov, wrestled for Ukraine, Olympic champ, beat Jamil Kelly in the Olympic finals, had a gnarly ankle pick from the elbow. And so I would study what he did, and I kind of turned it into a little bit of a hybrid from what I did. The challenging thing too was I'm a right leg lead, but I would, like you said, I would grab, in my mind, I kind of broke down the statistics. I can't remember what it was, but whatever, call it, 83% of wrestlers are right leg leads, and, 75% of the time, a lot of them are going to reach with their right hand. So I made this deliberate, intentional effort from the time I was a freshman until really I didn't start hitting that until my senior year. I mean, really, it took 4 years to really develop it and get it right, because again, I was a right leg lead and I needed to get to the left side. So to really make it work at that level against the high level guys. But yeah, I looked at that statistic and I was like, okay, well, that's what guys are doing. So I'm going to get good at tying up on the elbow with my right hand and learning to step with my left leg and ankle pick to people's right leg. And it ended up being my number 1 move from the time I was a senior in college to, through the international level.
Yeah, it's interesting how certain things just stick, right? Like every kid's shown, I don't know, hundreds, but lots of techniques, and some stick, some don't, some just feel good. And it's just something you watch, you know, that if I'm thinking about the same match you are, it was because Kolat wrestled Tadeve a few times, but later in his career, it might have even been the Worlds when they were in Tehran, Iran, and we didn't even go. And there was a final, and it might have been Tadeve, where he was just hitting this over and over on the elbow tie on the outside. Because I had always thought you had to have an underhook to go to that far side. But yeah, it was just fascinating to see you hit that. And I think it was Earl Smith posted a video of your semifinal match your senior year, and there was a little bit of that in there.
Yeah, that was fun to see. I hadn't seen that for a while. I had tagged him on a Twitter post because, dude, it's absolute. Like there was about a month or two, I was going through a time where literally I 2 weeks straight I would lay down in bed, and usually I'd go to bed, but I'd pull up my computer, I'd get home, and I'm watching, 2 weeks worth of college wrestling matches from 80s, 90s, 2000s. From now, his channel is amazing. I can sit there for forever watching some of those old matches.
Yeah, it's because that's such an exciting round too. You know, everyone. I mean, quarters probably the most, semis, and sometimes the finals are a little bit less action packed. There's so much on the line, but the semis and a lot of his matches are from those rounds that you don't see. So it's awesome, and what an advocate for wrestling. Talk to us about your senior year. So you All-American as a junior. As you mentioned earlier, quarterfinal round, you take out the guy from Boise State who beat you at the Pac-10s or Pac-12s. I always get it confused. Pac-10 or Pac-12?
At that time it was Pac-10.
Pac-10.
Now it's Pac-12.
So you get to the finals, and talk us through, like, Saturday morning you weigh in. What are you feeling, like, emotions and nerves throughout that day leading up to the finals?
I was so confident I was going to win. I was so confident. I slept good the night before. I didn't really cut weight at 57, so it was nice. I was able to eat a meal the night before, go to weigh-ins. I had to shave for some reason. I guess I missed some spots. They made me shave and made weight. We ate a little bit, drank a little bit, and then we went through, 30-minute to an hour workout. And then I went back and relaxed. And I remember being very, dude, I was just excited, dude. I was anxious to get out there. I was trying to nap before the finals, but I felt very confident. I really was going to go out there and just, I was going to get as many takedowns as I could get. I really didn't have a strategy in that match, which, looking back on it now, maybe I should have had a little bit more strategy. We went over some detailed, like, technique positions. Mark Perry and actually Corey Cooperman kind of jumped in on it and gave me a few pointers on some finishing positions. But I remember I said if I always made the national finals, like, I wanted it to be exciting, and it was a 6-4 match. There were takedowns early on. There were some scrambles. I didn't want it to be a stagnant, just 1-1 close match. So I really tried to come out firing. I scored right away. And then he got up, and then I think, again, you never really know what could happen, but it's the end of the period. I'm in on a single. He's near the out of bounds line, and he'd done this to me before. And I just, to this day, it's one of those where, like, I lay there at night and just, where you kind of like cringe. But we were near the out of bounds, and I tried to jump, capture his far foot on a single leg and get the two, keep my toes in. But he had a trick leg or a trick knee. So he tricked me, got behind, and right at the end of the period. So it was 3-2, and he was good on top. So it made it a little hard because when you had to chase JP, it wasn't good. And that was different. The strategy that we had the year before with Sammy Henson is we weren't gonna chase him. We were gonna make him kind of chase us a little bit. And so, yeah, I was confident though, man. I had every belief. And when I stepped off the mat, I was sad I lost. I was hurt because that was a dream I'd spent hours and hours envisioning and thinking about. And I remember went to the back. I was definitely sad. I was heartbroken, but I had no regrets because I believed I did everything I could to put myself in position in my knowledge. And I believed when I went out there that I didn't hold back. I tried to put on as much of a show while I was out there and not make it a slow match, So, you get what you get sometimes, but I have no regrets, man. No regrets.
And from what I read an article that you did a couple years after, but it said that after that match, that kind of sent you on about a 2-year journey of kind of self-discovery and I'm just curious, well, was it like a religious thing for you, or was it more so kind of figuring out how you wanted to progress your career after that match?
Yeah, well, my faith was always an important part of my career and my life. And so the bounce back after that, I always knew I was going to wrestle on the international level. That was something that was ingrained in me from time I was, I was young. My uncle was a very successful athlete. He was a two-time world team member in the marathon. He was one of the top 10 runners in the world and ran in 3 different Olympic trials, qualified for 3 different trials. Was
Wow. That's your
injured three
uncle?
different times. This is my uncle, yeah.
Wow.
So amazing athlete, well known in the running community. And but so my mom was witness to all that, and she saw that he never got to achieve his goals and dreams. And we were watching the '96 Olympics, and she told me, "You're either going to go to the Olympics or you're going to be the president. So you better choose one or the other." Basically, like she kind of laid it out straightforward. My mom's like Italian, old school, like kind of lady, and very matter of fact, and that's just kind of what it was. So it's like, I think I'm pretty good at the sports thing, so I'll go the Olympics route.
Right, right.
And so, yeah, dude, those 2 years afterwards, I think, I struggled with, and I don't think I ever really, I didn't overcome a lot of it until really I was later on in my career. I think I struggled with as an athlete, and a lot of athletes do, just finding your identity in what you do, right? Finding your identity in wins and losses. And I look at it now, and people are always like, if there's anything you could change about your career, what would you do different? Um, and that's kind of one of those pieces I always tie back into my career, is just the identity of who I was, not being so rooted in wins and losses. It's great you got to be a competitor. You got to want to win. You got to hate to lose. That's part of being a competitor,
Mm-hmm.
but not to the point to where it affects who you are, how you act, how you treat people, how you, and to this day, it's still one of those things, even as a coach, to manage it, I have to be very, very, very diligent, because it was a habit that was there for years and years and years at a high level. But those 2 years, I really just took a lot of, and Coach Slay would always talk to me about it. We'd go get coffee, and we'd always talk about where my identity lied. Was it in wrestling, or was it in my faith? Was it in Christ, or was it in the wins and losses? And I think I would say it was like, in Christ and who I am, but really it's a lot of it lied in the wins and losses. And so that was kind of that start of that journey. I would say I didn't really see that journey through until probably 4 or 5 years later in my life, where it really started to kind of manifest itself, and the understanding was there.
It's a hard thing to do because now I feel like, just from doing so many interviews, it seems like that thought process is more pervasive. But we're similar in age. Like, I don't remember that being a thing coming up at all. Like what they, separating that. I don't remember anyone ever talking about that.
Yeah, the evolution of all of it too, right? The evolution of the mental game. I mean, you've got so many people understand the importance of mindset and sports psych, and then the diet. I don't want to go too far off, but dietary changes, recovery, all this kind of stuff. I mean, these are things that you're seeing now. But yeah, there's certain things that are interesting that you see posted on Twitter, you see people putting out there, and the evolution and the thought of over the last 10 years, within the world, within sports, though, within wrestling, and the mental side of it. I mean, we're so much more keen and aware to it than we've ever been before, right?
I think a lot of it has to do with Kale, because those guys are winning, and a lot of times they're winning with the approach you're talking about. Is going out there. You hear it all the time. It's almost cliche, but just grateful to compete, and that allows them to wrestle free. And man, that just seems, those guys of that era, the David Taylors, the Ed Roos, like in Bo Nickel, all those guys, they wrestled like that. And so, to me, that just seems like it kind of started to you started hearing about it as Kale started doing his thing, and now it seems like it's definitely kind of a mainstream thought.
Yeah, and mindset wrestling mindset. Mike
Wrestling
Moore,
mindset, fantastic.
he always talks about that. He's a good friend of mine, and he's come here. He did mindset training for us, and some people have their feelings about it. Honestly, I was not a big fan for a while, but in terms of bringing in someone who has the knowledge and the specialty as a coach, you know, I think and it's not a plug for them. I just really saw the value in what those concepts that sometimes it's not knowing, it's not, we know what to do, right? We kind of know those things, but how to lay that out for large groups of people and kids and just put those thoughts into kids when they're younger. I didn't have that when I was younger. You know, it took me all those years to figure it out. Now I'm like, man, I want kids to know at, you know, this age that we value your effort. You know, if you go out there and you lay down and you don't try, yeah, I'm going to be pissed. You're going to hear from me. But you go out there, you give your effort, you fight your ass off, like you do that. And you know, and however it ends, win or lose, I'm a competitor. So I'm still probably going to get fired up, but I'm going to, you know, I'll praise you for that, but be thankful for the opportunity. You know, I always try to do that for myself and reflect that in the kids and athletes. Be thankful to your parents. Thankful you get to step out on this mat, right? Last week we had the state tournament in Nevada, and the state thing, it's interesting, state tournaments and all this stuff, but they have them all split out in weird ways. And there's the 5A brackets, the big schools. The 4A is kind of big-ish schools. I don't know how you want to lay, but one of the kids came up to me and it's not good enough. He was like, "You're just state champ. It's not good." 4A, you know, basically he's like 4A, it's only 20 teams. And I had to stop him for a moment. Like, buddy, like there's 50 other people in here that would love to be in your spot. There's 3 through 4th or 2nd through 4th placers that would love to be in your spot. And regardless of 4A, 3A, 2A, 1A, you need to be grateful. You need to be thankful. And I'll tell you who I got that from was Jordan Burroughs. I was in a down part of my career, 2015 in Illinois. I was just wasn't really competing well. And he came out, you know, we ended up building a good friendship over the years. I was actually going to be his training partner for the World Team Trials one of the years, and I had hip surgery. And he was always a good friend and just wise, dude, really wise years, you know. And I was kind of complaining a little bit, and I remember he kind of stopped me and was like, "Hey, dude, like you're two-time Division I All-American. You're in the national finals, multiple time, you know, placer. You wrestled on the international level. You've placed at you know, you're an NYAC champ. You've placed at this tournament. You've done this and done that." And he's kind of going through this list. And I remember when he laid it out that way, I kind of was like, all right, that's actually a lot. And coming from, you know, arguably the GOAT, you know, like, and everything he's done, I was looking at, well, you've done all this. I'm thinking in my mind, you know, but just the way he was able to bring that knowledge and what he said, dude, that I will never, ever, ever, ever forget that conversation. And to this day, I have that same conversation with my kids when they're struggling with comparison to where other athletes are at. You got to be grateful, you know, all the things you get to achieve, because there's always somebody else that would want to be in your place. Right.
Yeah. No, that's cool that JB broke it down like that. Cause like you said, man, I don't even know if it's arguably anymore. It could just be the GOAT. You know, what John Smith did in 6 years was special, but JB and this longevity, and when the Soviet Union is now 16 other countries, you got to wrestle every round. It's not just one of them, you know? So it's like,
Yeah,
freaking crazy. I wanted to ask you about two other things before we sign off. One is, you mentioned, obviously you're in Vegas, the epicenter of UFC MMA. So is one of the things you do to kind of help offset your gym, do you do a lot of like kind of paying the bills by doing jiu-jitsu classes? Is that a model you found good success with?
that I actually do jiu-jitsu classes.
Like, do you offer jiu-jitsu classes at your gym, or is it strictly wrestling?
No, so we've gone strictly wrestling.
Oh, wow.
And here was my thought process is, I'm a specialist at what I do, right? There's not very many who've done it at those levels and in that way.
Yep.
And let's add on top of that, like in Las Vegas, you know, there's you know, for Nevada, it is what it is, but I've probably had the most successful career wrestling wise, you know, of any Nevada athlete. There's a few others that have had very successful ones. Depends who you ask, but I've been all in all, I've had a very successful career here in Nevada. So when I come back, I have that kind of reputation. And so I always said, when I came back to Vegas, I was like, I'm going to stay in my lane.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a wrestling coach at the end of the day. I wrestle. That's my specialty. I do jujitsu. I go to another gym who has a lot of same wrestling mentality, which is that's a whole other conversation, the jujitsu world. But I go to
Yeah.
this one gym that I really enjoy because they've got a little bit of a wrestling mentality to what they do. I have some guys that come over here, but we do really, our business model is we go all the way from 3 years old to 18 years old, and we have it leveled off in terms of classes, that there's a promotion system and there's a shirt system within each of the within those classes, sort of a ranking system. And then there's also, like I said, there's those levels. So I kind of took a little bit of gymnastics model of business and put it into a hybrid of jujitsu and that model. And that's kind of really how we built our foundational business model. So we're really able to, I'd say we've got our main location, and then we've got 2 satellite locations, and we're probably running well over, 250 plus kids in all 3 locations,
Wow.
all the way from 3 years old through 18 years old.
So how does the
So
shirt system and like belt system? Is it like a belt kind of, or?
we do shirts. So we do shirts. So to really break out all our classes, we have our minors system, because we're Gold Rush minors,
Mhm.
MINER, So minors is 3 through 7 year old, and that's just a progression system that does wrestling, and we also work with a company called Tumble Track, which is really big on the gymnastics side, and we've worked to develop a curriculum from 3 years old to 7 years old that helps progress these kids to that age. I am highly against kids under 7 competing, but I'm not gonna sit here and tell people like, hey, we want our kid to compete. No, you can't. But I'm highly against really under that 7-year age group really doing a lot of competition. I'm more on the development side, and so our whole program is based around, there's a certain color shirt for the 3-4 year olds. There's a certain color shirt that the set 5 through 7 year olds get, um, and then once they're past 7 years old, our next set of classes is called our Discover series, which is just Discover Wrestling. And there's 3 different levels within Discover Wrestling that you can level up in. Discover 1 is where our belt series is. There's a white shirt, a gray shirt, and a green shirt. And every time we do testing every couple of months. And really that's kind of for your kid that's just kind of trying it out, having fun. It's really more like it's not a competition class. You can't do any competitions in D1, but you can just do it. You can learn wrestling. And then when tryout time comes, we do a tryout twice a year. You can test into D2 or D3 or elite. So
Wow, you
yeah,
got
so
it really
D1,
broken out, man.
yeah, it's a whole thing.
That's
So
cool.
it's been really good. So then Discovers, yeah. So we do Discovers, and then from there they go, once they've graduated out of Discovers, they have just D3 is called Travel Prep, Discover 3/Travel Prep, which is now you're preparing to go into elite classes, and you're preparing to start traveling. So, and then branches off different ways for high school and high school boys and girls from there. So
It makes sense because otherwise you go to a club as a 6-year-old, you're learning the same as the 8th graders, and you're just in this mesh of people. It's like, where's the advancement? What are we doing? And people like a track of advancement, just like in your career, right? Like people want to move up. It makes so much sense to do it that way. So that's fascinating. And it probably helps with the retention.
it does. It's a blessing, dude. I look at, I was talking to the coach the other day. I'm like, dude, our retention rate is actually, analytics wise, it's not, that's there, like, you're not supposed to be that high,
Right.
um but we, like, again, I think it goes back to creating, there's something that's always being chased, and we're playing for the long game. So I'm not wrestling kids when they're young because I want them to have a long career in this sport.
Wow. If I'm a high school coach in Vegas, I'm trying to get all the Gold Rush kids. Before we sign off, man, I got to say how much I enjoy your videos of the wrestling spoofs. My favorite one is, I think it's like, what kind of coach are you in terms of the handshakes at the tournament? Like sometimes it's like you give like 10 examples, and you walk past the guy, you give him the nod. The other one is you give him like a 2-on-1, you try wrestling. I'm like, where'd you get the ideas for all these videos, man?
Dude, there's some more coming out. We took a 2 week break because we're starting to really, like, I'd really love to crank them out a lot, but some of them I kind of see online. I get ideas from other people that I see online. Some of them I'm observing, man. I observe the funny stuff that people do at tournaments, coaches, like the little mannerisms that we all do, you know, the little head nods, when you're both walking with your hands in your pocket, you tap each other on the back, you know.
I
We
like the
just did one.
confused coach, the one where you're like trying to explain the day and you're walking by.
Yeah, yeah, that's dude. We've all been there, dude. And then and then I watch parents at the tournaments where I see parents. And I'm just like, dude, parents are ridiculous, bro. Like, it's so funny to see some of the mannerisms that the parents do, you know. So I'm an observer, man, and they absolutely,
So funny.
and it keeps it fun, dude. I get stressed during tournaments, so whenever I can find something funny, I write it down on my phone, and I'm like, hey, coach, I got one. Like, next week, I think we got a really good one coming up next week that we've been working on some content for. So
I'm excited, man. The maybe you've already done it, maybe you haven't, but the one I always thought would be funny. Once I saw your video, it had me thinking about this. It's like, which warm-up wrestler are you? You got the guy punching himself, you got the guy doing stance in motion, you got the guy getting slapped around. I mean, there's just that would be one that would be funny for you guys to tackle, is how do you warm up? You know, which guy are you?
I think we had that. I think we had done something similar to that we tried. And it might have fell off. We might need to circle back on that one, because that was after Fargo last year, and I think we tried doing it, and then we were like, nah, we're gonna go on break. You know, dude, that's a good one. You gave me some good ideas for that.
Yeah, it's well, and people who are listening, go to Chase Pami's Instagram, because they're sprinkled in. You know, that's like every fourth or fifth one you'll drop one, and it is hysterical. I mean, even like, yeah, like you wrestling parents, you would think by now you've heard how much people make fun of you, but apparently it hasn't changed, because your content of imitating parents is spot on.
And I try to make fun of the coaches too, because one of the parents was like, they were all joking, but I'm always like, maybe there's a little truth, because like a bunch of them were like, man, I kind of feel attacked. I'm like, well, let me show you what all the coaches say and what we do. So
Yeah, the coaching ones are good too. Yeah, I'll have our guy repost them, because they are funny, man, and I enjoy, man. It just kind of makes me think, man, if I'm a kid in your club, I know that I'm getting great instruction. It's serious, dead serious, but also coaches got some jokes, and that always helps too.
Yeah, it keeps it fun for little kids. The high school kids they always get a kick out of it. I'll see them repost like, our coaches are funny, and try to stay cool with them. And I'm getting older. I'm 36, but I like to think that I'm still 17, 18, 19 when I joke around with the kids. I know some of it, hopefully not all of it, comes off cringy, but
no, it's funny, man. It's good. And it's like, it only find it funny if you're in that world and you're a wrestling person. But if you're in there, it's like, man, this is spot on. It's good.
Heck yeah.
It's absolutely, man. And Chase, I just want to thank you for coming on, man. It's been a lot of fun, and time flew by. I can't believe it's already been an hour 15. That's freaking crazy. And yeah, I hope to get out to Vegas potentially for Henry's fight against Aljo. So if I do, I'm coming through the Gold Rush room the day before, brother.
Please do, man. I would love to have you in here and just see everything. But yeah, dude, and thank you again. Like I said at the beginning, you're doing amazing things. You had one of my wrestlers on. You let him do a shout out, Atticus, last week. Thank
Fan
you
of
for
the
that.
week, baby.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I got a lot of wrestlers and kids that listen to your podcast, and it's the content stuff is great. So keep doing what you're doing, man. I'm a big fan, and I'm appreciative to be on, man. It was an honor when you asked. I just felt honored and thankful. So thank you.
Well, dude, I can tell you're going to come back on, because we have a good flow, and there's a ton of shit we didn't even get to. So like, I want to learn all about the UFC PI and working with some of these top level athletes, because that's a whole nother game, man. So we'll definitely have to get you back on here the next couple months.
Sounds good, brother. I look forward to it.
All right. Thanks, man. Take care.